I lost my way, and out of the darkness I began to pray. I said, God, what can I do? Then I listened to the voice that came through. Celebrate life, follow your dreams. Celebrate love, it's in between. Celebrate faith to see you through. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate. Celebrate you. I got off of my knees and I opened the door to let the sun in. I hadn't noticed before. This light I see, the song I hear, a beautiful melody, rhythm and harmony. Celebrate life, follow your dreams. Celebrate love, it's in between. Celebrate faith to see you through. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate. Celebrate you. It's all in your heart, it's all in your mind. Don't give up on hope, just give it more time. Celebrate life, follow your dreams. Celebrate love, it's in between. Celebrate faith to see you through. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate you. Celebrate life, follow your dreams. Celebrate love, it's in between. Celebrate faith to see you through. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate you. Celebrate life. Celebrate love. Celebrate faith. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate you. Celebrate life. Celebrate love. Celebrate faith. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate you. Celebrate life. Celebrate love. Celebrate faith. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate you. Celebrate life. Celebrate love. Celebrate faith. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate you. Celebrate life. Celebrate love. Celebrate faith. Celebrate me, I'll celebrate.
Security is an illusion. That's my talk for today, because we are moving, and it's bringing up stuff for people. Not everybody, but according to Harold and Michael, who are talking to a lot of people, our move is triggering things in people. It triggers their own sense of insecurity. Because if we're not stable, what's stable? Well, I've studied the history of religions in the world and the history of the Christian church. It's never been stable. Praise God. Stability and security on anything outside is an illusion because it will not happen, it can't happen, it shouldn't happen. Our security and our stability should not be based on something outside ourselves. And if we do want to base it on something outside of ourselves, it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. And so what can happen is, not just with our move, but anything. How many of you have had a friend lose their job and all of your memories of you losing a job came up? Or how many of you have a friend that got dumped? I mean, it could just be that they left, but their story is they got dumped. And it brought up all your stuff about being dumped. How many of you have watched a friend go through a medical trial and it brought up all your stuff about when you went through a medical trial? See, stuff can trigger us and it's not even concerning us. Well, a spiritually mature person can make a differentiation about those things. But I do know that we will get triggered. It's normal, it's natural, and I'll be talking about that today too, about how to overcome the triggers. Because trigger happens. Used to be stuff happened. I live on a farm, so I can say this, shit happens. You can't say that unless you're on a farm. Well, triggers happen. Things will trigger us. This is what happens. But Ernest Holmes drew from all the great religions, the great philosophies, and the discoveries of science. And if I'm going to meld what he was trying to say in a few words, I'd say that he wanted to use ancient and modern wisdom to heal hurts and build dreams. And anytime we're triggered and we let it get to us, it hurts us. And we can't build a dream on that hurt. I've said this before, and it still concerns me. Or not concerns like I'm triggered, but concerns like how can I help? I'm concerned that in recent studies and surveys, 70% of the United States is under high anxiety and high stress. Even if they're not going through anything themselves, they're still triggered. And it's upsetting them. And upset hurts. Anxiety and stress will lower your ability to think straight. It will make you more emotional and reactive. And it will, I'm not going to say destroy, but it will damage your body. If you keep that stress up, your body will be damaged. So what can we do about that? How can we apply spiritual principles, ancient and modern wisdom, to effectively deal with anxiety and stress? That's what today's about. And I was just getting ready to do this talk, and I remembered my very, very first public talk, and it was called Earthquake. It was my talk. I did it in ministerial school. I was proud of it. It was my candidating talk. I impressed people. It was here, I got a talk. And it was inspired by a huge earthquake that had just happened. So let's see, I graduated ministerial school in 84. So in 83 or 82, there had been a huge earthquake in California, and all I remember reading about, because I didn't know Californians, I'm from the Northwest. Anyway, but I read that the reports were that the quake would send out ripples through the earth, and the freeways would ripple, just vroom, vroom. And I thought, whoa, the power of something rippling a freeway, like it was an ocean. I mean, does that just boggle your mind? That's some power. And at the same time, I was working downtown, and I was watching them take a whole block apart and dig deep into the ground to create the foundation of the Columbia Tower Club that would become the largest tower in Seattle. It was huge. And it went down and then it went out because there had to be a stable foundation so that when the earthquake happens, the tower wouldn't topple. They were building a foundation and they were investing in that foundation. Now, what's interesting is that 2 months, about 1 to 2 months right before I graduated from ministerial school, an earthquake happened in my life. I'm not going to say what it was, but it was an earthquake. It rocked me. I felt like waves of stuff was moving out from me and making me want to collapse. And then within about, it's so weird, about a minute and a half, I mean, there's, and then it was like, ka-doom. And I responded with grace and intelligence and serenity. And I thought to myself, I'm ready to graduate. I can do this. I'd built a foundation so I'm not going to get rocked. Now, like, I'm not the manager for this Columbia Tower Club, or the Columbia Tower, but I bet they have to continually maintain that structure. So I still have to maintain that foundation because stuff still happens. We will have stuff happen. I'm drawing from 2 teachings today. One of them is the Buddhist teaching, and in Buddhism, stuff happens. Suffering's optional. And I'll actually give you some clues on how to avoid the suffering. But before I go there, I want to talk a little bit about Ernest Holmes. Ernest Holmes in the Beverly Hills Lectures talks about the difference between a cure and a healing. And I was surprised. I've read this book so many times, but he goes over it and over it and over it. I'm getting it. That a cure is a fix. It makes it better. A healing is so that thing can never show up again. And he said, most people, physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists and even metaphysicians, 95% they're going for the cure and not the healing. And then he quotes Carl Jung, who said, there is no healing. Carl Jung said, I've never seen a permanent recovery. I've never seen a person change. I've never seen a person get healed without a spiritual revelation. And Ernest Holmes was saying the same thing. We can use our mind to fix something, but we're always going to have to be fixing something unless there's a spiritual realization, so that spirit downloads itself into our mind and we have new thoughts. Because as God said, I don't know, God didn't say it, hey, write this down. Write this. I know it's on papyrus. I know it's hard. Unroll the thing. Unroll it now. Unroll it. Hey, unroll this thing and take this down. I got a thought. Okay, so here's what I want you to write down. We'll call it a Bible later. But anyway, I want you to write down, my thoughts are not your thoughts, comma. My ways are not your ways, period. But it is in the Bible. God says to Isaiah, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. So even if we rearrange thoughts, they're still our thoughts until we've had a spiritual download. And then we have new thoughts. And then there's a healing. Ernest talks about it in many ways, trying to get the whole point across through this book. One of the things he talks about is someone who called him up and wanted more friends. He wanted a friend. So I need to ask you, just to see if you're different than first service. How many of you have ever wanted someone to like you? God bless you. I should have taken a picture of first service. It was only Marilyn Gregory and I. Honest. Who is first service? Who are they? Isn't that true? I said, who's ever wanted somebody to like them? And Marilyn Gregory raises her hand. Nobody else did. I said, who are you people? Who are you? I want friends. I want people to like me. I wanted my sisters to like me. I wish my mother would have liked me. I got a whole bunch of congregants I wish would like me. Oh, no, honest. But how many of you wanted that? And so you go to a practitioner and we say, I want my boss to like me. I want my coworker to like me. I want my neighbor to like me. I want my son-in-law to like me. I want to like my son-in-law. And what Ernest said is, that would just be a cure. The healing is to know you're one with everybody. The healing is to know that there's no one to like you or not like you because it's all God. Are you open to being loved? See the difference? Now I'll give you another example of cure and healing, and it's on Netflix. You can watch it. And what's the name of it? Miracle. It's on Netflix. It's by a mentalist. How many of you watched the series, The Mentalist? This guy's a mentalist. He thinks thoughts. Notice that? That's a thought being thought. He thinks thoughts, writes them down, and gets the person in the audience to say them. And they're weird sayings. I mean, they're not like something these are weird sayings. And you watch them and you don't know how he gets them to say them. It doesn't matter. But then he says, because the whole show's called The Miracle, he said, I'm going to heal like I'm going to act like an evangelist, and you're going to experience how an evangelist does things. I'm an evangelist, and people are healed, and I'm going to heal you. And so he has people imagine themselves on the stage as perfect, physically perfect. And then he says, now have that rush back at you. I'm going to do this someday by CBAC. It'll be my CBAC for the talent show. I got to get garb. You got to have garb for this. I don't know how I'm going to be dressed up, but it'll be great. So he says, see yourself perfect. See yourself physically perfect. Now have that perfection run to you. Now do it again. Now do it again. And people are going, ugh, ugh. He said, now, who among you has had a healing? 10% of the people raised their hands. Now, 10%, do you know that 10% effectiveness in some drugs, it'd be a bestseller? So out of 4,000 people, 400 line up because he says, come here, I want you to talk to me. Line up. One woman had glasses. I can't see, I don't need my glasses. Another person said, I had a bad neck. It doesn't hurt, look at me, I can do this. And my back was broke, I haven't been able to stand up straight, look at me now. Amazing healings. And then he'd even do, I'll have to have, I don't know I'll do this at CBEC, but he even does this thing, he pushes them backwards and they go straight back. It's so good. So good. But at the end of the show, he said, to the woman who doesn't need her glasses, don't throw them away. And to the people who don't hurt, don't give up your pain meds, because this only lasts about 3 weeks. See, he could change the mind, but he hadn't let the mind be changed, and he knew the difference. Cure versus healing. I hope you come here for a healing. This is not to get over something, this is to become something. To become different. What if you could be secure? Stuff happens. This bugs me. I'm triggered. 2 ways to do that. The first one comes from a story that I read about Anthony Hopkins. And now he's known as one of the most loved actors in the world. 40 years ago, he was a drunk. And he was playing on Broadway, and during the intermission, he'd go out to the bar next door and belt as many as he could before the second act. He'd still know his lines, but they were slurred. He also said that nobody liked him. He was belligerent, he's unpredictable. He was talented, but he was a mess. He ended up in AA, and still he was a mess. He ended up in AA, and he was not drinking, but he wasn't a nice person. And then he said that a woman came over to him and said, and these are the 7 words that changed his life, "Why don't you just trust God? Why don't you let something greater than yourself help change that mind of yours?" Why is AA all over the world? Because it's about knowing, this is my interpretation, knowing that you've come to the end of your rope and you've got to trust God. Whether it's a substance or process abuse, or it's just that you can't stand your in-laws. And you know you should. Eventually we have to trust God. Eventually, I think people like you and me, I think eventually you have done everything you can and you see a bigger future and you know you want to go there, you don't know how to go there, and you just need to trust God. You don't want, who would sign up to be anxious? Who would sign up to be all stressed out? Who would sign up to be triggered? And yet it happens and we don't know how to not have it happen. Well, maybe it's time to just trust God. That's the first thing. Trust in God. That's the first thing that I want to say. I was reading Jacob Needleman, and he had that every human being is born with an intrinsic yearning to understand, to connect, and eventually to serve something higher in themselves and in the universe. It defines us as human beings. Even more than our biological nature, our social conditioning, or our ordinary reasoning capacity, it's that yearning to connect with something greater than ourselves that makes us human. We just eventually will want to trust God. But in the meantime, we're triggered. In the meantime, somebody gives us a look, cuts us off, doesn't say the right things to us, doesn't say it the right way. In the meantime, I could go on and on and on and on. So this was where we get to the Buddhist teaching. And this comes out of the book. Come on. It's not reading my thumbprint. It doesn't think okay, there we go. This comes out of the book, Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change. And in this, a Buddhist nun, Pema, I forgot her last name. Thank you. Is quoting from My Stroke of Insight from the brain scientist Jill Bolte Taylor. Jill Bolte Taylor had a stroke. All of you remember that? And because she was a brain scientist, she actually watched herself have the stroke and watched herself recover, so she knew how the brain was working from the inside out. Yeah. She explains the physiological mechanism behind emotion, an emotion like anger. That's automatic response. It's an automatic response. Somebody pokes you, it's automatic to feel anger. to feel fear, to back up, to fight. It's automatic. It's not bad. How many of you have ever been angry and then felt guilty? I went to therapy for that. I was a minister and I was so angry, and I only took one session. When the person said, well, that's normal. Thanks, here's your money, I'm out of here. It's normal to feel it. It's what you do with it that creates the problem. More on this from a physiological standpoint. An emotion like anger that's an automatic response lasts just 90 seconds from the moment it's triggered until it runs its course. That's what's happening in the brain. You have a response, and she watched it. 90 seconds, it goes away. When it lasts any longer, which it usually does, it's because we've chosen to rekindle it. The fact of the shifting, changing nature of our emotions is something we could take advantage of, but do we? No. Instead, when an emotion comes up, we fuel it with our thoughts. And what should have lasted a minute and a half may be drawn out for 10 or 20 years. We've just kept recycling the storyline. We keep strengthening our old habits. So, the trigger comes up. Our friend says they lost their job. We feel empathy for them, and then we think about the time we lost our job, and our cousin lost our job, and there's nothing going right. Somebody looks at you a certain way, and you go, I remember that look. I remember how that was. I know what they're going to do next. I wrote it on my Facebook page, like me, because I'm sometimes brilliant. And sometimes not. It could be either way. But I was looking at grudges because I was observing somebody tell the same story over and over and over again. You sit down and talk to them and they've got the same story, and I was wondering, what's that about? What it's about was a thing happened, and instead of healing it with some forgiveness and letting it go, it got covered over with, I'm not supposed to feel this way. And then it got infected. And then it oozes. And relationships were amputated because it was hard for them to be in the same room, where 20 years ago, it could have been different. It couldn't have been, we can't look back, there's no fault finding it. I can't go backwards. But what I can say is, we can go forward and be healthier and have more mastery. And notice that when we get triggered and we feel the emotion, we can go 101, 102, 100, yep, minute and a half. Yep, that's right, it's gone. Actually, the author of this said, what we should do when those emotions come up is actually pay attention to them. Don't talk about them, just pay attention. And they're gone. If we resist, we'll have a story about it. We'll make ourselves wrong, like I made myself wrong being angry. And then it persists. It goes under. I had an infection once when I was in my 20s, and I didn't take all the penicillin, and so the initial infection went away, but the real infection just went deeper and showed up someplace else. Just be with it, and it goes away. So I'm putting myself on a 12-step program, and I'm inviting you to join me if you choose. Hi, I'm Kathianne Lewis, and I get triggered. I'm Kathianne Lewis, and I'm not Jesus yet. Well, actually, the Christ. But one day at a time, I will abstain from thoughts that make me suffer. And one day at a time, I will be clean and sober and not partake of the lies I've told myself that outside conditions control my moods or my future. One day at a time, I will ask God, the God of my understanding, to reveal to me the kingdom of heaven within and without, because I cannot do this without God. I'm asking for God's help. I'm going to trust God. My stinking thinking has not brought me heaven. When I've allowed new thoughts, I've been in heaven. I've been in heaven. And I want heaven all the time. So if you choose to, you can repeat after me and we'll have some gorgeous music. One day at a time, I will abstain from thoughts that make me suffer. One day at a time, I will be clean and sober and not partake of the lies I've told myself that outside conditions control my moods and future. One day at a time, I will ask God to reveal to me the kingdom of heaven within and without. Amen. And so it is.